Yeah, you have to turn it on because and that plug, it just...
You to run in for a minute.
I really don't know what I can tell you that would be interesting.
Well, I think that you have a special story. We've been talking here this morning. I'm sorry I didn't know you better. All those years you were in Lansing.
Well, I know because when Doyle was working on this book, I think that's how he got to know you. And he'd come over during working hours and everything, and I just saw you like at historical meetings once in a while or something like that.
That's true. That's true. That's how I met Phyllis Fitzpatrick, was because he was working on the book.
Yeah.
The book, The Strange Story.
And I know that he mentioned so many times of how much help you were to him. And,
Oh, really?
oh, yes.
I didn't know that I did
yes,
so
and how
much.
much you cooperated and all the things he needed and how you were helpful and always, helped him and got it for him. And he was very much appreciated, I remember.
He used material well. His book was well received, by scholars and amateurs alike.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I should, for purposes of the tape, should say that it's August 24th, 1990, and this is Geneva Kebler Wiskemann, and I'm sitting here with Phyllis Fitzpatrick. This is Doyle Fitzpatrick. We're at Paradise Bay on Beaver Island. And what a beautiful spot, Phyllis, to look out and see the lighthouse right out here. Now, you've been on the island 14
years. This August, actually.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And you and Doyle both were long-term employees of General Motors Oldsmobile.
Right. He was 32 years and I was 28, actually.
Mm.
Although I had some interrupted service, I left at one time and then came back, but it dated back to 28 years. It would have been more, but when you break your service, then they start you back. So he went there during the war, actually, because he had run a business on his own, actually, of artwork and doing freelance type of artwork, and then went to Oldsmobile.
And you did stenographic work for us?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
At the time you went to work, probably there weren't very many opportunities for different kinds of jobs that we have compared to what we have today.
No, there were, it was typing and filing, and I actually went there during the war too, and worked in engineering, and there was 3 girls that were out there in this huge area, this huge big room where all the engineers were, the draftsmen, working the drafting boards, but we were out there in the middle, kind of, and we were surrounded by files, huge files that went from the floor way up, where they filed all these blueprints and the parts of the cannons and the shells and all these things that we were working on. And then we would also collate them, and put them together, and they were distributed different places, and then all these copies that we had to keep were filed. And it was a very routine and kind of boring job, but it had to be done. And sometimes we have these little milk stools like that we'd sit way down on the floor with those things to get to the low drawers, and then we had to have a high stool to get up to the kind of the top ones, But the only real part about it that made it all worthwhile was that we were out there among all these fellows, and they kept it very entertaining. They picked on us a lot and teased us and came over and talked, and this was allowed. It was all very kind of like family, and we enjoyed that, and so that kept all the boredom away. And then I especially enjoyed it because some of the secretaries would go on vacation, Why then they'd have me come over and work for them because I could type when I do dictation. So I got to have a little experience that way. So I eventually, got a stenographic job because of it. But I had worked at the Weather Bureau before that, and I was so tickled to get an Oldsmobile. It was so much, I liked it so much better that I was willing to do a very mediocre job because I figured that sometime there'd be a better chance.
You worked at the Weather Bureau?
Mm-hmm, East Lansing.
That must have been an interesting job.
It was, yeah, it was kind of, but I had a very difficult boss, and I was a state employee actually. I was the secretary. The other people in the office were federal. He was federal government, and there was a fellow and I think 2 girls. They were all federal, and I was state because I was the secretary. And that was a funny setup. Excuse me, but yeah, it was kind of interesting, different things, but not really. I didn't have too much to do with that. The interesting part was, where they got them information in, about the weather and the things they typed up and sent out. But the interesting part was like we get a lot of phone calls from people asking the weather and asking different questions, and that was interesting. And I, if I didn't know, I could ask one of them. So that part was fun. And yeah, I didn't have too much to do with it, but I learned some things, just by being around the rest of them and equipment and all. But
were you a native of Lansing?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, I was a native of Lansing.
Went to school there.
Mm-hmm. Eastern High School, and I went to Michigan State for about 2.5 years.
And then you went to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you met Doyle?
I met Doyle Oldsmobile, yes. I worked, before the Weather Bureau, I worked at Auto Owners Insurance. And I had been going to business school and just taking special courses in typing and dictation and business English and things like that. And during that time, I was there for maybe 3 or 4 months, and finally decided I better just get a job. And so somebody told me that auto owners had certain days a week that they interviewed girls for jobs, and so I went down there, and there were about 25 girls waiting to be interviewed, and I was the last one. I sat there all afternoon. I was, very nervous, and the longer you sat there, the more nervous you got, and everybody would go in and come back out, and you wondered, I wonder if they got the job. But they interviewed all of us, they didn't just say, well, make up their mind and say, well, she's hired and the rest of you don't need to wait. So I was the last one. And so this gentleman was Jim Otto, who did the interviewing. And so he said to me, if you don't hear from me within a couple of days, you call me. He said, you call me. So I think it was like on a Friday when I was there. And so then the next morning, being Saturday, he called me and he said, if you want a job, you will have a job, So when can you come then? And can you come, like on Monday? And I said I could. And so that was a very interesting experience, and I learned, started out like in underwriting, learning where you figure the policies, and I went through a whole bit there before I got a secretarial job there. Mm-hmm. It was a nice company to work for. It was, that's where I really got my first chance. They were willing to give inexperienced people, training and give them a chance to work. Mm-hmm. And I found that was very hard, even way back years ago, that you couldn't necessarily just walk out and get a job if you had never worked before. And how could you have experience if nobody ever gave you a chance. That's the bad part.
You still hear the same stories.
Sure.
How did you,
Yeah. How do you get experience if you won't hire me?
somebody has to be a mentor.
That's right. And they were noted for that. Yeah, that was. And then from the billing, or the figuring that part of it, then I worked in the part where they had the billing, all the machines where they type the policies up. And it was a special machine that you used like a typewriter, but how they were threaded on this long kind of roller thing, and how they fed on this and then cut off. But you couldn't make any mistakes, and that was pretty tough. And they saved all these, all of them that you made a mistake on and had to destroy or put to one side. You had to put in one place like a wastebasket, and they checked those all over every night to see how many you had. And if you had too many, they really told you about it, because that was costly, paper and all the waste. And the woman in charge of it was a woman, and she was really tough. She really was. And there were a lot of girls in there. It's a great big area where we worked, and she had to be that way, because she wouldn't let you talk to anybody unless you asked her if you could, if you want to talk to the girl in front of you about something. You had to ask her if you could speak to her, and she'd usually say yes,
Well, if you visited, you would make mistakes.
Sure. And, she had all these people and all these machines running, and all the noise and people talking and everything too. Why, she had to be that way. But they all thought she was really dragon. And she really, she knew her business, so, and she stuck to it. But she was all right if you played fair with her. You asked permission if you didn't talk to them unless it was important. So, and I remember this girl that sat back with me, and she had fingernails that were way out. I swear they were an inch long, and she would be typing on this machine. And how she could, I just couldn't believe it, that she could do that and type on those nails. How she could do it with, and be accurate, not make mistakes. But just typing with those long claws, actually. But she did. And this was before auto owners had their building and were all together, and they had offices in 3 or 4 different places all over Lansing, and that made it
And they built
quite an operation.
After the war, they came together in a building there on Townsend
Right.
Street. They bought where the Pattengill House
Right.
was,
Yes.
and tore that down.
Yeah. Had a nice office building.
Then eventually they outgrew that and moved out
Right.
to the suburban area.
Yes.
Familiar pattern of development. You've been up when Doyle retired. Did you retire together?
No.
Or
He retired about a year and a half before I did, and I was able to retire that soon because they had it was actually a similar situation during an oil crisis in the 70s, and they were then, trying to cut head count back, and so they were offering special retirements for people who were 55 and over, and I was 55, so I was able to go on a very special deal, and I was glad because he'd been retired about a year or a little more, so it worked out really nicely.
I know that after his book was finished, I think some of his energies began to be devoted to this house, the
Yes,
creation. Did he design the house?
No, we found it. A friend of ours showed us this. It was a house of the week. It was in the State Journal. On Sunday, they would have a house plans, and and tell about it. And we'd already found one that we liked. It was like a double A-frame, like where it was, kind of one angle, one way and one facing another. It was a good plan, but then a friend of ours had cut this out because he had known that we were interested in Beaver Island and in this property. And he said, I found this and I think it might be something you could use. And we liked it better because it seemed to fit the lot there. It had to be one that was narrow on one end and then ran the long way of the property, because there was a lot next door available, but the woman wouldn't sell it. We didn't acquire that until after we had built the house. Otherwise, we could have moved it over more, more in the center, but she wouldn't sell it at the time. So we sent for the plans through the State Journal and got the blueprints and everything. And we had quite a time to find anybody that would build it. That was one thing. We had given the plans to a local builder, and there weren't very many on the island at the time. This one probably had the bulk of the building, and he had the plans for almost a year and never would give us a quote or a price or any information. And I guess he just really was afraid to tackle it, but he didn't want to say so. And finally, one time when we came up here, Bill just went over to his house and just said, I want the plans back. So then we tried to figure out how we could get it built.
Many of the things you have in the house came from the Ariol's residence that went down to make way for 496.
Right.
Some of the bevel glass doors and
the windows.
The decorative art glass windows.
Leaded glass windows, yes, and then the bedroom windows. All three were in the ballroom, matching the ballroom. And I was trying to think if there's anything else from those.
This medallion that you have implanted into the stone fireplace. Can you tell us a story about that?
That was from Oldsmobile and up over the company car garage that was attached to the administration building. And when they raised the building, all of those just came down. And when they were doing this, Doyle went out there and talked to the men who were working on it and said, would it be possible to get a couple of those, and explained how he wanted to use them. And they said, well, we aren't going to go to any big effort to save them, but if we just happen to get one that comes out all right and doesn't break, why, fine, you absolutely can purchase that, but we're not going to, just sit here and take pains that it doesn't break or break up when it falls. So, but we were able to get two, so it worked out very well. One outside in the chimney and one in here.
One on the outside looks like a phoenix.
A phoenix, it is. These were beautiful all along the, the edge of the garage.
They're very distinctive decorations.
You didn't think too much about it when you went by there every day and looked at them, but then after it got moved and put in, where it stood out just one, you think about it. Everybody always notices that. And we thought the bird looked like a robin, and that was the state bird, and so we thought, well, that'd be pretty to have that one. So we're glad that was one of them that they saved, and also the phoenix was very special.
Yes, there's two birds supporting the flower.
And Doyle always said that was an eagle, but it really wasn't. It was outside, it was a phoenix. And the man who did the stonework was, interested in it, and he was very willing to put it in. Of course, we weren't here when he did most of it. Just told him, sketched it out, and how he wanted it to go. First, we planned to put both of them inside, and then we decided, no, it wasn't. It was too much. It just needed one, so one inside and one out worked out very well.
This is just the right size for where you have it here.
Yes, it is.
right side as you face the fireplace.
Because the other one was a little larger, and so the outside fireplace chimney is massive, so it fit in there very well.
Do you have other things that came from the old residence that I'm not looking at?
Let's see, I'm trying to think. Of course, those doors were in the ballroom too. That French door there, and the one goes downstairs. I think that's about all I can remember.
Oh, and the chandelier. That's an outstanding feature of this cathedral ceiling.
Yeah, the chandelier was in the Greek Orthodox Church in Lansing that was very close to Oldsmobile, and they tore that down to build a new church. And the chandelier had been given to the church by Angel Pregoris, who was, I think it had owned a restaurant at one time in Lansing, and had gone over to Greece and had seen this and decided to give it to the church. And at one time it was not electrified. It was just, candles. Mm-hmm. But he, anyway, he shipped it back to Lansing for the church, but somehow or other it got lost and it wound up in some South American country, and they finally traced it back and did get it back to Lansing. But Father Poulas, who was a pastor at the time, wanted a really good home for the chandelier because he felt so badly they couldn't use it in the new church because that was going to be a modern structure, and this wasn't going to fit in. So he had several offers, I guess, for it, but when he found out what we were going to do with it, then he was very, very interested and so he said, "Oh, that's yours. You can just count on that. You can have that. You can plan on it," because he said, "I know it'll be in a good place, and that's where I want it."
Well, we're sitting here at midday, and it catches even the light, even though it's an overcast day here on Beaver Island. Tonight, I'm going to walk down by the shore and look back.
Oh, that's a sight. That's a sight to behold.
It must be like a lighthouse.
Yes, and sometimes in the evening, we would turn it on just so you can, people coming in the harbor on boats or something could see it. And it is a sight to see when you look down from the beach back up and see it, because you don't expect to see that, for one thing. And this structure is only half of it. The full chandelier, that's 19 arms, and there are 19 more that we didn't put out because it would be so massive.
Wow.
And then it was solid with crystal. That's just, we purposely wanted the skeleton to show through, so it wouldn't look so ornate. Because when he told me what he wanted to do and put that in his house, I said that would look terrible. It's too ornate and too big, and it won't fit in there at all. But he was right. He said we won't put it all up, and that's half of it.
Did you save the other part?
Yes, It didn't have another center part. There'd be enough for another chandelier if you could get the center, the ball and the center, glass and all that part. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of crystal still that we didn't use. Mm-hmm. But I don't know where you would ever get the other part. I've often thought I should contact somebody, and see if there'd be a need for it, because somebody might have some other parts that would all fit in.
It's a gorgeous piece, and it's now just the right size for this.
Yes. It really is.
You have no idea how old the piece really is, do you?
I'm not really sure. I don't know if he has it written down. I don't recall coming across that anywhere, but he might have written down about it, because he did document some of those things. But we had quite a job getting it down. Excuse me. At that time, they were just doing Oldsmobile's new office building, and the man was in charge of a lot of the interior work, was from Detroit, and he told Doyle that he said, that chandelier is a real bargain. He said, you should be sure that you do get it. And he said, I'll help you so you can get it down, because it was up real high in the church, well, just about as high as it's hanging there. And so he built a scaffolding, and we went down on a Saturday and Doyle got up there and took it down. And then there was a man who worked around the church and did odd jobs for them, who took the whole center part down, the chain and all the main part of it. We took all the crystal off and put it in boxes and labeled it. And on the outside he drew a picture of each piece, you know, that was in the box, so we knew where they were. And we had, I think, 7 boxes all together when it was all apart.
It's an outstanding piece.
Yes.
Now, I know from being in Dr. Joyce Thomas's office a few weeks ago, Phyllis, that you donated some materials there to the Lansing room of the public library.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you tell us for the record how that happened?
Well, it happened because I was disposing of some of his books, and through a mutual friend I was in contact with Shirley Sliker of Lansing, who's a book dealer, and she came up here to visit her friend who was on Beaver Island also, and looked at the books, and then we talked about some of the things that were historical about Lansing, about the Olds family, about Oldsmobile. And she mentioned that the Lansing Library would be very happy to have things like that, that there were many places that they also worked with the Olds Museum, and they kind of interchanged materials and things, and if they couldn't use some things, they would probably contact them to see if they could be used elsewhere. So that's how it came about. We found quite a few things that did pertain to Oldsmobile, and pictures, and a lot of pictures that were taken during the war of the assembly line and the workers, and different parts that they were featuring, you know, different new parts at Oldsmobile, hydromatic drive, and many different things that they were advertising. And then there were some executive pictures also, and just general information. Some pictures of Lansing that were old Lansing, that were from Ford Caesar's collection, actually, that Doyle had duplicated. So they had quite a variety, you know.
Ford had accumulated things that you find in the library and in the state archives that were from the old Edmunds Bovee collections. And they may have been, and then Ford took a lot of photographs through the years of it with his own camera.
Yeah, I'm not sure which they were. I think most of these, I think, might have been duplicates from
the older era.
Right. They were very interesting pictures, but I thought that would be a better place for them than for me just to have them here, you know, to look at once in a while. But there was one time at the press club that Ford and Doyle and Raji Tobias put on an evening's program of old Lansing, and they had these pictures.
Oh yes,
and
Raji was a good friend of Doyle. He loved Doyle.
Yes, he did.
And Raji was such a interesting man. I knew him too.
Yes, I always missed him. He used to come over, and
I still miss him,
and spend an evening, you know, and they'd get to talking about history and different things, and then he was very knowledgeable too because of his work at Michigan State Library. And it was always interesting to hear them, and he used to come over a lot and visit and call up, and they'd talk on the phone, and every Christmas he'd come over and bring some of their goodies, you know, that
the Lebanese foods.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Miss Raji had gone to the American school, And because his father worked for Oldsmobile, he was part of that community of Lebanese people that were brought over by Ariolos to work in the factory.
That's interesting.
And
And I had forgotten about that, but I do remember him mentioning that too.
And he, of course, was not really trained for the world that he found he had to work in. I believe he ran a newspaper in Detroit in the Lebanese community for a while.
I believe that's right.
And he came to Lansing and had a restaurant opposite on Berlinden there, opposite the factory.
That's right. Yes, he did. He told us about that and the problems that he had. Yes, he was a very interesting man. Very nice man.
When you say Doyle's books, did you have a remainder stock on his book on King's Strang?
Yes, I still have it. There are about 3 boxes left, and about 24 in the box. And I get orders every now and then for, like Fair State University and different bookstores, and not a lot, but occasionally. And they sell some on the Island Jets at the museum, and one store had a whole box this year and sold them all. So there's still orders come in for them. But the supply is dwindling down. He had 5,000 printed, which was a lot for that type of a book. So
I believe he told me that at the time it was computer-generated text, and it was innovative at the time.
Yes, that's right.
It was very innovative at the time.
Right. Absolutely.
I don't know how long you worked on that.
On the book, about 7 years before it was all final.
How did he become interested in Beaver Island?
Well, I actually just mostly through George Egbert, who had a place here for a long time and worked at Oldsmobile with him. And he used to talk to him to Doyle about the history of the island being very unique.
So George Egbert talked about the island, and George already had a cottage up
He already
there.
had a cottage here, and he had come here for quite a few years, and he talked about there were many Mormon buildings still on the island, and Doyle got very interested in that, but of course we found out that wasn't true. They really weren't. There might have been some lumber that they had used from some Mormon buildings, but there weren't any Mormon buildings actually except a print shop, which is the museum. But he got very interested in the history because it was very unique about a Mormon era on Beaver Island, and then them being driven off the way they were, and then the Irish, taking over. So he got quite absorbed in it, and sort of wrote things down, and always said he didn't realize he was writing a book. He just was kind of writing things down just to have a record of them. But first thing he knew, he was decided, well, King's Strang wasn't really as bad as he was painted, and he wanted to prove it. This was a big thing. But people up here would never agree with that, because they still, a lot of that has been dispelled. I think the book did a lot to correct that, but they still have their feelings about it, that he was pretty bad. But people who come over here and visit and come to the museum, that is the main thing they want to know about, is this King's Strang and the Mormon era on Beaver Island, which is very unusual. And we met many descendants, from all the different wives, and very, very interesting people who've come, who've looked us up and have wanted to know how they fit into the whole picture. And usually he was able to help them and to find us and trace it back. I have a lot of knowledge because of having typed the book so many times, but I don't have the ability to check this out and help them like he did, and to trace it back. And if they could tell him, who their grandfather was, or give him some names, he could find it. Usually I always find it for them.
Well, he used primary resources and
Yes.
used good research techniques.
Yeah, it's been a very, very interesting experience. And this one fellow who came last summer, Jim Strang, who was the great-great-grandson of the king, lives in New Mexico, and he has traced the family he was from Sarah, the fourth polygamous wife, and he has really researched that and traced it and knows the history very thoroughly and is fascinated by it and follows it up, and his two sons also do. But he's not interested in the other branches of the family from the other wives, or in following that or piecing it all together or getting all of it, fit into the whole, just of the one particular one. And most all of them are like that. They want to know about their one particular line, yes. And they're all very interesting. So when you sit back and see them all together, and all the different ones and meet them, it's really wonderful. I have that advantage that they don't have really, because you get to see the whole
They have
picture.
a common gene background and a common ancestry to a degree,
Right.
and yet they isolate themselves from part of it.
Yes, that's true. And they don't seem that interested in the others, And all of them have been remarkable. It seems like a very talented, or special, do have, the genes seem to carry through. This one who visited us is a very talented person. He was a flyer and flew for Great Lakes Steel and several companies, and he had his own air transport service and charter service, and does now repair work on instruments, aviation instruments, and still flies, and still a very good pilot, and is a very fascinating person. All of them seem to have a lot of charisma.
Is this man you've been describing, Jim, that you
Jim,
mentioned?
yes, he was here last summer. He visited us in Lansing 19 years ago and came to the house and spent an evening with us. And at that time wasn't that interested in the family, but got interested over a period of time. And then later on, just studied it a lot more. But the connection was that Hazel Strang McCardle was his great-great-aunt, and she was the lady that helped Doyle so much with the book and told him a lot of things, a lot of history, and gave him different things to use in his book. And she was one of the few that was not ashamed of the fact that she was a Strang. And most of the families at one time or another were kind of hid from the rest of their children and other generations who they really were. But she had always been very open about it and was very proud of the fact of who she was, and she helped Doyle a lot with the book. So that was why we had a close tie-in with her, and a lot of correspondence that they did, and I gave all of this correspondence to him to sort over and to keep, and to keep what he wanted and what he didn't want to, just to destroy. But she had a journal of when she was a child and how they journeyed from Oklahoma way up into Canada, where they had this farm, and they still have this farm today. It's in his family, and all the children own a portion of it. So they keep they kept this intact over all the years. So it's interesting.
Was Hazel in this area? And do you know how Doyle got in touch with her?
I don't know how he heard about her somehow or other, and started writing to her, and they had a very over a long period of years of very lucrative correspondence, and all these letters that were several file folders, and told a lot about her, about the family, and about things she remembered, and it helped him a lot, in getting the book organized and different things that she knew. that she remembered and that she was proud of knowing and didn't try to keep it hidden, which was the case in many families. And they just didn't want to admit who they were, changed their name and just never said they were, but the book did a lot to do away with that kind of thing. Then they came forward, and we had heard from many of them all over the country, even those that are not directly related but go back to a common grandfather, or someone way back. Or
if Jim has that correspondence, it might be available for microfilming, and adding to the material that you gave to the Lansing Public Library would be a collateral collection to support the book publication and continue to be used.
Yes, it could be. And then, of course, Doyle has microfilm that he used from Yale University of that he used to put into the book. And he didn't use everything, but, I still have that. So that's available, if anybody ever wanted to research that more thoroughly. And then there was a young man here last summer also from Grand Rapids area whose name was Strain, and wanted to know how he fit into the family background and picture, and thought he was related to the king. But when Doyle checked it out, he was not, except way back through a common relative. But we did find out that he was related to one of them who was a murderer, and way back in the East, and had been hanged for murder, and he thought that was about as notorious as though he'd been related to the king. So he came back up this summer. I saw him in the library, and he was mentioning it again, that how he was able to find this out and hadn't known, how he fit in before.
Was this a Michigan-oriented story? Was this a murder in Michigan?
No, it was back in the East
back
somewhere.
in the East.
Yes. He didn't really know, and all of a sudden then he's mentioned some names, that he was familiar with. And so I was able to, through this one work that Charles Strange did, who was related also, but back through a common ancestor, who did a lot of genealogy on the family. They had put out this publication, Strength of Westchester, and Doyle had this together in a book, real thick book, and so he was able to trace that back, and that's how he found how the young man tied in, and that it was this person was an actual convicted murderer.
How did the young man react to that?
He thought it was very interesting, and his wife thought it was kind of terrible, but he thought it was pretty neat, really. Almost as though, as good as being the king, related to the king.
Are there any descendants living on the island today?
No, no Mormons. There are a few Strainites still in existence who practice the religion, and a lot of them are in New Mexico area, some up in Burlington, Wisconsin, some out west a little further, California, Colorado, but not very many that practice it, but there's still a few. There was one in Lansing, Stanley Johnson, I don't know if you remember him, but he was a very devout follower. He had a lot of material on string. And I think that his material went to the Clark Library in Mount Pleasant. I think that's what his wife said, that she had disposed of it.
Is he still alive?
No, Stanley died a few years ago.
I remember seeing him one time at the archives when Dr. Mason was there.
Yes. He had a lot of information. Quite a collection, too, of different pamphlets and things, and was quite helpful, about sharing information.
I know it's not easy to decide what to send where, and Doyle was a real saver of materials.
Yes, definitely. And one thing that I'm puzzled about what I should do with is this diary. Edward Chidester, who was the postmaster and a very loyal follower, String wrote this little diary that Doyle acquired a few years ago, and it tells of the actual shooting and taking String from the island back to Burlington, and of his actual death, and all that is very, very, valuable information.
Do you have that now?
Yes, I do.
And you're trying to determine the best place
Yes,
for it to be.
that's right.
Is this something you want to sell on the market, Phyllis, or are you able to financially to donate it?
I hate to think of anything as important in history as that being sold for a price, but I don't know either the best place to donate it. Where it would be of the most value and it's very delicate. It couldn't be handled or actually looked at by people because of the delicacy of it and the fragile nature of it. It couldn't be reproduced because it would be, too difficult. It's too...
You have to be transcribed very carefully.
Yes.
What, do you remember what the dates are approximately?
Let's see. I think... I'm not sure. It starts like in January and mentions a meeting that was being held, and then goes on up through the time when he was actually assassinated. The year that was 1856, I think, wasn't it? And goes on through, and then there were several other diaries, but they're just general until about life in general. After that, maybe not really interesting. This one tells the whole actual shooting, and it's just unbelievable. It will tell this in maybe one sentence or one line, and just just says so much in a few words.
This was the diarist was the postmaster here on the island?
Yes.
How fortunate.
And the printer, also the printing office. He worked in the printing office too. Where they had the newspaper. Printed the, well, it was actually the only newspaper north of Grand Rapids for a long time. But a lady had this. There were this diary and two or three others that were together in an old shoebox, and she lived in East Tawas, and she had seen an article in the Free Press that had been written up about Doyle. There were quite a few pieces done by reporters who came here and interviewed him and who did stories on the island, and it had been this one particular time in the Free Press and had quite an article about him and pictures and mentioned the book. And this lady had found in this shoebox out in her garage, an old garage that they were going to tear down because of wanting to sell the property and not wanting the building on it. And somehow she saw this old box in there, and she looked in it to see what was in the box, and she found these diaries, and she wouldn't have thought much about it except she had seen the article in the paper. And so after she put two and two together, she realized that she had something important. She called him on the phone and asked Doyle if he would be interested in buying it. And he said yes, he would, and so then they kind of tried to figure out a price, of what it would be worth. And she said, well, I don't know. And he said, would $50 be okay? And she said, oh yes, that'd be fine. And so he said, well, I don't really know unless I look at it. But he said to her to mail it, registered mail or certified mail. And she said, no. She said, I'm going to bring it up there in person. I'm going to bring it right up to you. she said, I wanted to see Beaver Island, and now I really am interested. And I said, I'm going to bring it. So she did. And when he looked at it, then he knew it was very important. But she does not know how it came to be in this building, how it got there, anything about, getting it, or how she happened to have it. It seems that some of the family of this man must have been around in that area somehow, but how it got in that old garage, nobody seems to know.
The provenance up to that point is very obscure. What a fascinating story.
I think after she had disposed of it, she sort of wished she hadn't, in a way. I mean, after she sold it to him, because she wanted, had always wanted parts of it. So we did photostat very carefully, those main pages, and send them to her. But she didn't know what to do with it either. But she, got in a good place. But now I have the same problem of wondering what to do with it, because it is a very important document.
Let me think about that a while. Maybe I can make some suggestions.
I really don't. I'm sure it would be valuable, monetarily, but I hate to have a price put on something like
It's
that.
difficult to put a price on
Yes, it is.
on a one-of-a-kind item of that nature.
That's right. It could, could be worth a lot, but it's just the idea that it should be somewhere, where it will be taken care of. I really should be up here, I think, but they don't have, the museum here does not have anything to preserve it, and it's already very delicate. It seems like it's definitely a Michigan item, but it truly is Beaver Island, but it would be very foolish to put it here under the conditions, because it's damp. They have no way to, to keep the moisture out, or any way to protect it.
It's never been exploited in any way.
No. A strange thing happened, though. There was we received a letter from a gentleman in Independence, Missouri, who says he has the largest string collection of material of any place, and mentions 3,500 items or something like that has to do with string material. And somehow or other, I don't know how, but he found out about it. He wrote us a letter, and it was after Doyle had become ill from one of the mini strokes he had, and he couldn't answer him. But I did write to him and told him that he wanted to know if we had considered or would consider releasing this to him so he could reprint it and then publish it, probably sell it.
Oh.
And I just wrote and told him that was impossible to do, because it was so delicate it couldn't be handled, and it would just fall apart if anybody tried to duplicate it in any way. And told him that he was ill, and that he couldn't answer, but that I was answering for him. And so then I did hear from, he wrote me a letter after Doyle died, and said he was sorry to hear about it, and wanted to know what I planned to do with any of his material. And he came to the island this summer and did come to see me. And he asked if he could see the diary, and I showed it to him. And he said, I would give you a couple $100 for it. And I said, no way. So, but how he ever knew about it, I do not know. I should have asked him, but I didn't. He was a young man, too, very surprisingly so, about late 20s. But very, very interested in string and a stringite, apparently.
And you have his address and know how to contact him.
Yes, I do. And he told me an interesting tale that Independence, where they do apparently have Latter-day Saints and a big headquarters, that they have string scepter. And I always felt that the crown and the scepter and the robe were theatrical sort of stage props, yes. And, that this was just used in the ceremony here, and it was just a symbolic thing of the coronation, which they call it. But he told me that they have the scepter, and it was made out of wood, and described it, and it was a burled type of wood, and some real old lady had this in her possession for many years, and that they were able to acquire it. And I just couldn't help but think it was just couldn't be true.
Oh, you questioned the authority
I
of that.
did, yes. But he said he'd seen it. Well, when he told me they had the scepter, then I think I said to him, "Do you have the crown and the robe also?" Because to me it was just a kind of a prop, really. But whether this is true or not, I don't know. I don't recall ever seeing anywhere where it mentioned about what the scepter was made of or anything.
So, but he didn't have any of the other things that you mentioned?
No, he didn't know about that, no. So I don't understand that. I really can't quite believe it. But he did. Definitely did.
And this is in a church-sponsored collection?
No, it's his own private collection. And he told me that he has this kind of like in his own home, kind of like a library type thing. He has all these cases and places that he stores all this material. But this scepter was in the church collection at the Latter-day Saints.
That's
apparently.
what thought I heard.
But he said he'd send me a catalog of all these items he has, but so far I don't have it. So I would be interested in in seeing what's listed. And he knew of a lot of different things that Doyle had, and a few years back he sold a lot of Mormon things to a podiatrist out in California whom we had met, who was interested in straying. Being a true Mormon, this was a very unusual thing because most of them did not really acknowledge him as being really even existing. But he was very interested in him, and so Doyle sold him some books and things that were mostly Mormon, but there were a few other things too. And this gentleman who came this summer knew that now how he knew that, I don't know. He knew that Doyle had sold them to him, so it's strange.
But there probably was a network of the faithful and of the scholars where they shared information.
That's true. And then he did mention that Brigham Young University had quite a collection. So through all these different sources, they probably find us out somehow.
And then he came here and you verified it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. He was very pleasant young man, and he and his wife came. They were a very nice young couple, but I couldn't, I really didn't get into it with him about why he was so interested. But I said, "Are you really a Strangite? Do you follow his teachings?" And he said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Except, of course, the polygamy, and I said, "Well, yes, but and the Strangites in Wisconsin follow his teachings, but they aren't that interested in him as a person, but they follow the religious part of him." So it's strange. To me, you couldn't really be interested in one without the other. Well, it just goes on and on and on, and all the connections and all the people and all the interesting things that have come up because of that book. All the people even back that have come here that we, wrote to. And it seems like every little while, even today, there's somebody writing, asking how they fit in or wanting to buy the book to see if they tie in, or if it's not straying directly. Some of their family were families here on the island, that were followers of his. Mm-hmm. So it just goes on.
That's the importance of that, keeping that correspondence file.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Tangible evidence.
Yes. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I've got several real thick files on, inquiries in general, and then quite a few specific ones. So.
It's wonderful that you were involved with the book publication and Doyle's long interest, so that you can follow up on that, Phyllis.
Well, the whole story itself of publishing it, founding his own publishing company, and picking out the paper and picking out the bookbinder and and establishing the company itself under the name and all, because he couldn't get anybody to publish it and do it the way he wanted. Got quality paper and quality binding and everything, special, and founding the company to do it purposely was fascinating to me.
He just went ahead and did it
Mhm.
to get the quality production
Right.
he did.
And set up this name, and it came up for renewal again this last year, which I renewed it again for a 5-year term. But probably when the books are sold, then it won't be necessary to keep it. But still, still sell some. But it's a whole really interesting. It was a very interesting experience, the whole thing. And not easy either, but because, at that time we risked quite a bit of money doing it all on our own. And he always said he never wanted to make money on it, just get the money back, which he did. And it still sells for the same price it started out for. And books are very expensive today, but still sells for the same price, $7.95 plus shipping. And paperbacks are more than that.
Oh, yes. Much more.
Yeah, it's very, very unusual.
Well, you've not only told the Strang story and about primary resources, but you've told the story of a Michigan author
Mm-hmm.
who published his own. And that's the only book he ever published, wasn't
Yes, never had any interest. Everybody would say, when are you going to do another volume? When are you going to go on with it? When are you going to do this? And I'm not interested. I just don't want to do anything. I just accomplished what I set out to do, and that's it. So he did have a collection from a man who was here on the island, who was a very interesting person in island history, also named Protar.
Oh, yes.
Fyodor Protar, and he did write down a lot of things about him, and had originally was going to publish a book about both of them, one part about Protar and one part about Strang, and then decided that that wasn't too good an idea, that each one deserved a special book, and so if he had to choose, he decided Strang was the more interesting one. And there is a lady who comes to the island every year who's done much research on Protar and has researched him down, traced his family, found out a great deal about him, and she has enough to publish a book, but she has never actually done it yet. So I wish she would, because that's
That's a fascinating story.
a wonderful story.
Newspaper publisher and a highly educated man.
Who escaped from Russia, and at the time when people were, the Tsar was in danger, and the revolution was going on and everything, and came over here, and how he found this particular spot in all the United States to come and settle in.
And start an entirely different reclusive.
Right, inclusive life, and actually ministered to the people as a doctor, and they called him doctor, although he was not. He was really a pharmacist and just a very good first aid person. And that's what we're back to again now. On the island, no doctors.
You have no doctors.
No,
If
back
you're
to
ill,
if you're ill, you better pick it up to be on the day the doctor's coming over from Charlevoix. Otherwise, you'll be flown off, and
the doctor medical doctor comes over from Charlevoix on a week.
Once a week.
Once a week.
But in the winter, that may not be true, because he may not be able to get here. Like the original from his writing, from his handwriting, and did the very first ones, where he could, first started out and then corrected it and all that part, that I did.
So you did the preliminary
I did
type.
that right from his handwriting.
We were talking about the doctor being on the island, and the fact that a baby was born.
Yeah, this winter, they aren't equipped at this medical center to deliver babies, but they used to. The doctor who was here when we first came up here, Dr. Christie, delivered a lot of babies. And just by the grace of God that nothing terrible happened, because they had no equipment, some things are complicated. They have unusual things that happen. They don't have instruments or anything to, like a hospital does. But he somehow was able to get by. But when he left, and the doctor who followed him, who became a very close friend of ours, was here for 5 years. A very, very good doctor, just threw up his hands and said, "No way am I going to deliver any babies. This no equipment, and all these lawsuits now and everything." And we said it's dangerous for the baby, for the people, for everybody. He said, "No way." So they just, went across when it was time. But last winter we had a case of bad weather, and they couldn't fly her off. And so there's a doctor retired here who's not practicing, but he lives down at the south end of the island. He was a family practice man in Lansing, Dr. Lang, a very fine doctor. And they called him, and so he came up, and finally the doctor did come over from Charlotte, was able to fly in. But anyway, it was a very successful delivery, and so now the people always bragged about they were native islanders born on Beaver Island, and so now they can't do that because for the most part they have to either go to Petoskey or Charlotte Hospital. It's just not safe,
So you have a 1989 native.
We do have, yes, we do have one more native. And it could happen again, but we have no doctor permanently. It's a nurse practitioner who's very competent, for the minor things, but he is quite knowledgeable and able to determine, when you do need to fly off, and can just insist that you go, which is important because you don't always know that if you're that sick yourself. But it's kind of scary not to have a doctor.
You go downstate for your services.
I go to Petoskey to Burns Clinic.
I remember the last time I saw Doyle, I don't know why, I'd gone probably to see someone in the St. Lawrence Hospital, I think it was. St. Lawrence or Sparrow, I've forgotten which one now. Memory is so fragile.
Yes,
and you came by, and it was a very difficult time there for a member of your family, as I remember. Someone was very ill, and you'd come down to be there.
No, I can't recall.
I suppose it was one of Cora Hunt's sisters at that
It
time.
might have been. It was Alma, I think. I think so.
I think that
And we
was
went
too.
down to see her, and then we wondered about staying because we knew she was very close to death. But we did come home, and it was just a few days later that she died, so we went back again for the funeral.
And
Yes,
I
you're
remember,
right. I remember that.
greeting you there and
Yes.
having a visit, and in a few minutes you came along.
I remember that now. That was Sparrow, I think. Yes.
I noticed on the wall you have a painting that says Fitzpatrick. That's Doyle's.
Yes, all of them are. This one, and the little one, and that one over the organ. Those are all his.
Oh, he was an accomplished painter.
Yes, he could have been very good. He loved to paint, and he did all these when we were still in Lansing, and painted quite very rapidly. I was amazed at how fast he could paint and just come up with it. And I do have a lot of little sketches that he did, for future paintings. And then he took a lot of them from my slides that I took because I am a photographer. And he would put the slides on and then sketch from those, and did a lot of them that way. But he did all this in Lansing. He never painted when he was up here. He just didn't seem to. All of a sudden, he just didn't seem to do it. And he planned to, because I have about 6 boxes of canvases that he purchased and brought up here planning to paint. And you can't believe all the artist supplies of brushes and paints. And I had a palette and easel and all of these things to do painting, but all of a sudden just seemed to not be interested at all in doing it. And I had so hoped he would.
Oh, and now the sun is boiling through. Look,
Yes.
the sun is boiling through, and look at this gorgeous light that
Yes.
floods this whole house.
That's
What a,
right.
And a perfect light for an artist.
Right.
Oh, how
And
how
you
fun.
always said, well, if I had a certain room, a studio room, and I could leave everything in there and I wouldn't have to put it away and I could just go down there when I wanted. I think that was the whole thing. He didn't really have the right light. He needed the north light, actually, and didn't really have the right place to do it.
Somehow he just set that aside from his life.
Hmm.
I'm impressed, though, with the quality of his artwork.
Yes. And then there's one in your room of this old house on Barney's Lake, which is a beautiful
Oh, I
house.
noticed that immediately.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And I have a lot of sketches of things that he had planned to do.
He's got all the mood of the old building and its environment.
And then one in the kitchen is too. It's a different view of it. Like when it had enormous lilac bushes. It was fantastic. But it burned down 4th of July about 5-6 years ago. The house just burned. So whether someone set it or camping, and the fire got out of hand. But I have happened to have quite a few pictures of it that I had taken with the lilacs in bloom, and I've sold many of that. Seemed to be one of the favorites. And now that area is the family that owned this property have donated to the Conservancy, Michigan Conservancy. So they have a plaque up there now, or a sign up there.
How do you spell that name? Did I hear it correctly?
The O'Donnell family,
Ah.
Barney O'Donnell. The lake is Barney's Lake, and this is the family of Barney O'Donnell, the heirs to this property. They fought over it for years, didn't know what to do with it, couldn't agree. There were more heirs every year, more family increasing and everything. So they decided that there wouldn't be anything left of it. Time the lawyers' fees and everything were taken out, and finally some of the descendants, the last year or so, agreed that this would be the thing to do. Give it to the Conservancy, and this will all be kept intact. There's orchards back, apple trees. It's a beautiful area. And then this hill and this house that was up there, and it looked over this little lake. But it was a tragedy that the house burned, but it would have fallen down eventually because they never fixed it up. Couldn't agree on what to do with it, so they just... Somebody decided it, I guess, because it was upset, either from a campfire and the fire blowing, or somebody deliberately torching it, just thinking it was an old house. But it was beautiful, and the lilacs, made it special.
Lilacs survive for centuries.
They're still there. They're still there. They didn't burn. But there are many interesting tales and things about the island too, all special places. But now there's a lot of development. Some of the areas that when we first came up here, that we always said, oh, how beautiful these are. Isn't it great that the way the terrain is, I'll never be able to develop this.
Oh,
Of course,
never.
No, never. And of course, here they are now, fantastic houses and all this gorgeous area.
You say that the new large, very prosperous, prosperity-produced houses are on the west side?
On the west side of the island, and there's one area, it was called Bonner's Bluff, and it was a real high, steep bluff that went down this little road that was very treacherous to go down, although we did go down there once with our blazer and wondered even then if we were going to make it. But it was beautiful, and then you got down to this gorgeous beach. Nothing there. You never saw anybody. You could walk along there, and it was just a special place. Now it's all been a modern road put in there. All these places are platted out and houses in there. And they're beautiful, but it's just entirely different, like another world. And every spot like that now is developed, it seems like. And there's hardly any undeveloped beachfront anymore.
This has all happened within the 14 years you've
Yes,
been here?
within the last, oh, probably 5 to 7 at the most. Yes.
What's the nature of the developers? Are they large outstate developers, or are they local
Some are
people?
local. Some are local and have capitalized on it. Actually, sold the lots and not developed it themselves, but sold the lots and then the people building. But there's one or two on the island now who are very good builders and they do a good job. But it's I think maybe that's why it's sort of losing its charm for me, because of the trend now and the way it's going. When I remember all the beauty of it, unspoiled, and how gorgeous it was, all these areas, and you could walk all these beaches and never see a soul, or be very rare if you would ever. And you felt free that you could go down there and walk and take pictures. Now, people that do have any places along there, a lot of them just have got it posted, keep out, private. It's just altogether different.
Change.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've been away from Lansing for 14 years, but when you go back, what are the things that stand out first as change?
Oh, just everything's so different about Lansing. The roads, the super highways, all the roads going in and out, all the development, all the I don't know. It doesn't even look like Lansing to me when I get in the downtown area and approaches to the city, and it's just so totally different. Some of the areas, of course, we lived on the east side, and I go back there around Frandor area. Area is still pretty much like it was. It hasn't developed that part of it, and it's easy to find my way around. But some parts of it are just thoroughly confused about where I am. Until I finally find a landmark or a skyline that tells me the general area that I am. It's much different. And I think living there would be a lot more difficult than it used to be. But it's still, I still have feeling that it's home. I mean, I always think about it as, that was my home, and for a good many years, I really always think Lansing is a special place. But I go back and visit my friend, that lived across the street from us, and we lived in Lansing. And I stay with her whenever I go down there, and it seems like I'm home there more than any place I go anywhere now, because it was, we had a lot of good times together, and being across the street from where I lived, that area seems to be more natural.
You sold the home that...
Yes, we sold it. Our daughter bought it, and then she only lived in it about a year, and then she sold it. So I think several people lived in it since then. But some of the one neighbor I saw last time I was down there still lives there, and I was glad to see her. So a few people, but most of them are different. Have changed.
The neighborhood's changed too.
Yes, one or two that's still living there that were there when I lived there, but not many.
I wonder what you think the future might be for the community with these changes taking place. What do you think the future of the town is going to be?
Up here, you mean up here?
Of Lansing.
Of Lansing, I don't know. I just think it's still developing a lot, growing a lot. I still think it's a good town, but it frightens me because of the crime. We really didn't have that much. When you had a murder or a shooting or something, it was an exception and a very unusual thing, but now it's common, just like all cities, and that part of it I'm frightened of. I would be afraid to go back there and live, probably, from that standpoint, but people that are there, seem to accept it and just, get along all right. But right now, the way it is up here, and you don't have anything like that to put up with, you're safe. And I never lock my door in the summertime. I go out all day long and I'm gone. We never take the keys out of our car, leave it on the street anywhere. Just leave your keys in the ignition or in the garage overnight. Never worry about it. I have to watch myself when I'm on the mainland, any place that I don't leave my keys in the car. And that you keep your doors locked, because here you just don't have to worry about those things. But it's much different in any kind of a city. And even in Petoskey and Charlevoix now, the crime has come to the northern cities too. They have a lot more problems than they used to have a few years ago. So it's anywhere. But
You said you had about 350 in the winter, and that population probably doubles in the summer?
in the summer we have probably 2,000 or 3,000 people. There are a lot more cottages and people here than you realize. And then of course an awful lot of tourists who come, like just for the day or for the week or 2 weeks. And an awful lot of people who are tourists who've been coming here for many years come back. They just come back year after year and rent places. They speak for them. Like if they're here in August this year, before they leave, they arrange for getting it next year in August or July or whenever. So that's a kind of a thing that just goes on. And a lot of people come over here with the idea that they can just come over and just get any place to stay, but that's not true, because you'd really be taking a chance. Yeah. And there aren't that many, because several of the motels that were near me down here are now condominiums, and they have sold them, and people own them, and they're kind of a condominium thing, and they come up, although they do sub-rent them or sublet them, but so this has happened in several of them. So there are only actually about 2 that are strictly motels as such, 2 or 3.
Planning and zoning is such an important part of the Ingham County and the greater capital region. What kind of zoning do they have up here?
Well, it's been kind of a hit and miss kind of thing, and now the last few years they're more strict about it. But it seemed to be before they could get any kind of a variance, anybody could, they had rules and laws and zoning ordinances, but anybody could get a variance for anything they wanted. But it's a little more strict now. They're getting, with it more. In the last few years, they've kind of eliminated anything around the harbor, anything more commercial going in, trying to keep it the way it is. And people want it that way. They did a big survey a couple years ago on this whole thing, and have a property owners group organized to try and see that anything undesirable is not going to be allowed to come in here, like developments. And several were in the wind, but it's kind of died down now temporarily. And the zoning is a little more, I think, enforced a little more. And they're getting more younger people and different people on the zoning boards, and I think maybe better qualified people than they had before. There were a lot of people that would just go, were yes men, and you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, and I owe you and you owe me, and so, okay, we'll put this through for you, and then now I've got a thing coming up, and let's see if you can work this out, But now it's getting to be a little more that they're more concerned with the overall good of the island and future of how it's platted out.
When we flew in this morning, even though it was gray and overcast, I was well aware of the excavation for gravel or stone, the mining that I saw here on the island, and then looked like the dump.
Oh, the dump has been a big problem. We've been having a real problem with the dump. It's June 15th, I think, was the deadline for the time that you could dump anything in there free, and that you could just throw anything in there. So,
Anything?
Just about anything, like lumber or old furniture or whatever, and it was bulldozed over and then other sections. But the state of Michigan really got on them about it, and the DNR, which has been coming up for a long time. And the people here have been negligent, the supervisors of the townships, and in doing anything really have had a lot of warning, but they have just put it off till the crisis has been this year. So we're recycling, and they're going to have a transfer station, and it was going to be just capped shortly, but now they've extended it for a little while, gotten a grant from the state so that they have a few more, about another month, that you can still take some big items out there, because a lot of the summer people didn't have a chance to come up here and clean out things like old metal or old things they wanted to dispose of. But I took a lot of advantage of it and got rid of a lot of old lumber and things that I knew I wasn't going to use, and just took it out there. And we had a joke about it, all these things that were sitting out around. People go out there to take something, and then they'd look around, they'd see something else that they decided they might want, and they'd take home. So it was a kind of a
flea market.
Yes. But they are getting into recycling now for the glass and plastics and a lot of things. But eventually that's going to have to be taken on barges and over to Charlevoix, where they do have an approved landfill, and that's going to be very costly. And hopefully the state's going to help somewhat, but it's going to be another tax burden on people.
The city council in Lansing has just had a very controversial decision about the city taking over providing recycling services, and some people were against that, and being a city-sponsored activity, and wanted it to be in the private sector. And but the council has moved forward on that now, so with a vote from the people. So and it is going to be very expensive, but I think people are prepared to pay for this now.
Yes, I think they realize they have to.
But that was to me it was a little shock to fly into this island, which in part presents a pristine view from the air, and then all of a sudden this soar as we came into the airport.
It's terrible. It's been a bone of contention with me for many years. I hated to go out there, but you have to do. But I've always thought how awful it was, that they had it. And there was a lot of opposition even now when they realized this has to be. Of people saying they thought there would be some other spot on the island where they could still have a landfill, but the state and the DNR say there absolutely is not. Well, it actually all came to a head when they felt that maybe there was groundwater contamination from this dump, and from all this plastics and all these things, and so they really got on them about it. And now people are more or less getting used to it, and we do have recycling going on. And then they voted a millage just recently for money for the transfer station and for whatever they have to do about getting it over there, which will be costly. So I guess they reconciled to the fact this has got to be, all over the country, the people are going to have to realize this. And you just pointed it out every day more and more, with this oil crisis and everything, and how negligent we've been during the last few years about that, not making any effort to conserve or save or to explore new, channels and new sources of, and it's still Bush is riding around in his powerboat and all that stuff. It's just kind of scary. But gasoline prices went up within about a week's time on the island, and so did fuel oil. So I'm not looking forward to that, which I will have to do, about filling my oil tank. But what can you do if I'm here at all in the winter? Why I've got to have it warm. So it's always expensive, but it's going to be more expensive. But the dump is it's very, very unsightly. And the awful part is that part of the land nearby and back of that, there's some beautiful trees and actually pretty land near it. So it always seemed to me like it was a terrible waste of, of pretty land that they had this dump, right in that spot. I think they did actually purchase additional land from somebody that owned it, for expanding it. So if they did, why, that's been money down the drain. But it was a very pretty area back in, some apple trees and kind of sandy, kind of little small dunes. It just seemed too bad to have it there.
And you mentioned the water supply. The water level is much reduced.
Yes.
And people are digging new wells of deeper depth.
Right. Yes, so the water table's down.
At the same time that you're getting development and more people.
Yes. Right. And they even talked about the survey that they did about a central water system and a central sewage system that, that this may eventually come out. If that happens, it'll be prohibitive, practically to live here because it'll be so costly. So if I haven't decided before then what I'm going to do, that probably will determine it because that will be very difficult. Because everybody has their own well and their own septic system, and their own drain fields and all of that. So it's a lot to think about. But to keep developing, having more houses, and if they do have any kind of development nearby, they will have to go to some central system. And they're not equipped for anything like that, at the present. It's just, but it's growing, the island's growing, the population's growing. One thing about it, most of the homes, although they're winterized and everything, the people are just mostly summer residents because most of them are still working, or they're doctors, or they're lawyers, or they're, professional people. And we did have one enormous, very unusual home, and a very interesting story that would take me on and on and on if I told you about it. But this home was built over on the west side, and it was a very gorgeous, a beautiful thing. They call it the castle. And it's, I don't know how many rooms are in it, but 30-some rooms, I guess. And this man came in here from Minneapolis and started building this. And it's nobody could believe it unless they would see it, that would be on Beaver Island. But he turned out to be a con man, actually, and had borrowed a lot of money from this bank in Minneapolis that his family was connected with, and so they backed him, and he really didn't have a cent, but the whole thing was unbelievable. And finally, after they just left it, stood unfinished for about 3 years, and was starting to deteriorate, actually, because it wasn't all finished and some of the outside wasn't done. And finally someone did buy it on the market for a little over $100,000, which was a steal for what was involved there. And this couple are from Michigan State, and she, I believe, was the dean of women, or had some very important job, or head of a department or something. And they were going ahead and finishing this, but it turns out that since this happened, they are since divorcing, and so the woman is ending up with this huge place all herself and finishing it off. I have no idea how much it would cost for the finishing of it, but it's a very unusual house. And you never expect to see anything like that and be around. I wish we could go down there and could show it to you, but they're still working on it and don't know if she's there or not, or how it is, but it's remarkable. And to think he ended up being a con artist, and one of my friends told me recently he is in jail right now. They finally caught up with him for some of this bad notes and bad debts and everything that he was pulling. So it has, I don't know, it was too good to be true, all of this tale about that he was telling about this place.
Mm-hmm.
But he, the way it ended up, a lot of people on the island had done work and contracted out and stonework and a lot of other work and heating and some of the things, and hadn't been paid. But finally, I guess they did, so they were all paid off in the end, but they were kind of worried about this.
Weren't even paid for labor.
Right, and labor and material.
What a story.
Yes, but it's a very unusual house. We all wondered what he was really going to do there and what kind of an operation he was running and what it was all about. He was going to have, he had a wall kind of up around the outside, a stone wall, and he was going to have an electronic system, like with the gates and security and everything. So we wondered what he really, why he needed this and what he really was up to. If he had some kind of, if it was drugs or something that he was going to be doing, that was kind of questionable.
A compound of that kind on Beaver Island, it didn't quite fit.
Not that many houses or all that many rooms, that practically had a house within a house and a guest house besides, and all these things were just too much, and didn't have that big a family. So he evidently just pulled these kind of deals, and there's no, I don't know why they didn't know that when they loaned him the money, but apparently they didn't. Was the talk of the island for a long while, but he did give a lot of people work, for quite a while.
Yes, Helen is out interviewing George Egbert. And yeah, well, that's a fascinating story. That'll become part of the Beaver Island folklore.
It will. Yeah.
Story of that.
Yeah, he. I don't know. They were saying that they wondered if he was connected with drugs or something, or what the tie-in was. But some people that live next door to him in a very beautiful house. The man told me the other day. He said, I understand that they've got him in jail, but apparently he had fled the country, and they'd been looking for him for a long time. He was just, where they couldn't find him, but apparently somehow or other they did catch up with him. So strange. But so many rooms in that house, but this woman's is spending a fortune on it, and she's got a special fellow who's very talented that does carpentry work and the finished work, and he's doing beautiful work there. I'd sure like to see that when it's all done. I've been through it, when they're still working on it and it's still far from finished, but it would be something to see when it's all complete. Very unusual.
It's a far cry from the Protar house and
Right.
other things.
I can remember when we first came up here, and there was a man that lived down south end of the island, a real nice man, and he had a place down there. And he said, I'm going back. He said, I've got a farm near Lansing, a lot of land, and he said it's out. What did he tell me? Was it near Grand Ledger? It was Grand Ledger, Portland, or somewhere in there. And he says, I'm going back there, and I'm just going to build a house out in there. And he says the island's getting ruined. He said there's too many people, too much building, too much exploitation. He said it's not like it used to be. He said, I'm going to go back. He said, I don't like what's happening to the island. That was way back before we built the house and before we moved here. And when we first came up here on vacation, and used to go around the island and enjoy it down the south end. We met him a couple times and talked to him, and that's what he was saying.
Even then.
And so, he was right, and it is spoiled in a lot of ways. There's a lot of state land that they own, and as long as they keep it, that's one big plus. But, well, a few years ago, they were having a big zoning thing about, we zoned a lot of this harbor area, from certain parts from residential to commercial to apartments. And this vacant property between us and medical center, a couple lots in there that this guy in Chicago owns. He's a lawyer, and they were going to rezone that to from residential, which is along here, to for apartments, and I think that's what he had in mind. But he couldn't get a septic system very well to do that unless he wanted to run it under the road through somebody's property, across the street, back to the property that he owns back on the other side of ways. And we all, just said to this fellow, don't do that, don't do it, don't ever sell it to him, or don't let him do it. And then he was interested in here, but found out that we owned this next door and everything. And or he could have run it up this way, but no, anyway, they had this one township meeting, where they were talking about the zoning, and which I went to, and I said that I didn't think that they should rezone it, that it was residential and all the houses were all along here. And there was one fellow, he was the DNR officer at the time, and he was on the zoning board, and he really agreed with me, and he said to everybody, I don't think it should be either. Well, they did leave it, so. But he, I think, has got something up his sleeve eventually. We tried to buy it from him, he wouldn't sell it.
Money's no object at that point.
No.
But you could see the damage that would be done to the visual environment if high condominiums were put in there, and then the view of the bay would be obstructed.
Right. But people, want to be on the water, and this is ideal. And actually, you could even put something down below, if somebody bought it and wanted to do that. But
you've got enough land.
So but then finally the consensus of opinion seemed to be that most everybody wanted the harbor left the way it was. They had this survey, this company had the whole development around the boat dock and around the rest of the harbor, like boardwalks and park areas and a whole lot of development. But people didn't go for it, just said they wanted it left as, pretty much the way it was. And one family over on the other side have quite a large area there of a house and several lots, and it's right on the harbor area, but they were all set to put it on the market for a condominium type of thing. We're going to do this. And people were protesting so bad at one meeting we all went to, they just backed out. And they have got it for sale through some real estate company, but not, I don't think, for the type of thing they were going to do. They finally said, if somebody wants to buy it and develop it, okay, but we're not going to do it, because they got so much static from everybody. And it might happen sometime, I don't know, but so far it's been about 3-4 years now, and it's been just left in limbo. So I don't know, it seems to be dying down. And then this property owners group organized, and after the survey came out, and people, one young man who is from Lansing that heads it up, have been quite strong in getting their voices heard, so I think that's helped.
You're saying that there are quite a few people from the Lansing area that are up here.
Yes, there are some from around Okemos, and yeah.
How do you account for that?
I don't know really, unless some are from the college. There's several that were teachers, some retired, some still teaching. And they, know each other or talk about it, and I guess that way. The same way with Ann Arbor, a lot of them from Ann Arbor that are friends, and I had friends here, and then it just kind of grows. Kind of,
I know Central Michigan has involvement here on the
Right.
island, and there's a hospice, elder hospice, that's going to take place in September, I believe, here.
John Cummings coming back. He was retired from CMU from Clark Library, and he was here last year and did an elder hostel, and he's coming back this year. Shirley told me a while ago that he's coming back.
I've heard about that in Lansing. It's being promoted there.
Yeah.
At the biological station, I believe, that's
Right.
to take place.
Yes. I started debating about whether I thought I might go. Joel was quite friendly with John at one time, and they came to our house several times, and we went. I think they came to a historical meeting one time, and came to, like for dinner or something. Came to the house first, and several times, and we visited them in Mount Pleasant, and then he took us to the library and showed us their collection. But after Doyle wrote the book, and the book came out, it just seemed like he never wrote to him and said, even though he didn't like it or didn't approve of it, he never even wrote a courtesy letter and said anything, about the book, and never any contact or anything. And so Doyle didn't contact him again either. But and when he got the tapes from Yale, the microfilm from Yale, he let John Cumming use it. And which he did, I think, made copies from that. But I don't know what happened. That was just kind of a funny thing. So we lost contact. And he hasn't been to the island for many, many years until last year when he came up for that. And I understand he's coming back again.
And he's actually running the elder hostel.
Well, he's
involved
involved in speaking, I guess, and everybody enjoyed him last year because he does know a lot about strain. And one year they were having it, and the people who are in charge, I guess it's CMU, the biological station, actually running it, but then they get the speakers. And they asked Doyle to do a thing on this book and to give a talk, and we were going off the island and going to Lansing. It was the very time that they wanted to have this, and we couldn't change our appointment. It's such a sudden notice, within a couple of days. So he never did do it. But they wanted him to talk about the strain. But John knows an awful lot about him. And some friends of mine attended it last year, and they thought it was very interesting, but they weren't into it too much about, didn't know too much about strain actually. So they would find it more interesting probably. So I'm thinking about I might go. I think it'd be interesting.
I was considering it too when I heard about it. I didn't know John was involved, but
I'm pretty sure yes.
It's a week long. If I could get away for a whole week, it would certainly be a treat. I've never done anything like that.
Sure.
Have you?
No, I haven't, but a friend of mine told me that that's a wonderful possibility of traveling because they're reasonable, and yet you learn a lot, and that they're in many very interesting places, and you meet a lot of very nice people and very interesting people that are doing this.
Rich mix of folk.
So he said a friend of his, some women who are widowed go even on their own. Sometimes they go together, sometimes they just go on their own, and it works out really well. So
that's good. Here comes Helen. She's back. I'm going to turn this off now. Phyllis, I really appreciate your sharing your memory with us. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I can.